Greetings. This is one of the most important PowerPoints in the class, and I hope you will listen to it well and probably listen to it a couple of times. Take some notes just to keep it straight in your head and to remember things a little bit more. And anything that I put in this, I expect you to use in your resume that you hand in for this class, and this material will be on the midterm. Also, you want to be sure to watch the cover letter one. I used to have this as one whole PowerPoint, but it was too long, so I've separated it into two now, and that's going to be reflected in your syllabus. We're going to look at 10 common myths about resumes, and then we'll look at formatting and tips for resumes. This will not be everything you will ever want to know. There are things also included in Georgia View for examples and other tips from other sources, but this will be a good place to start. And so that's where I do want to start, is with myths about resumes. People get some really interesting ideas about resumes. The first myth is that a good resume will get you a job. The truth is that a good resume will get you an interview. There's a step between the resume and getting the job, and that's called the interview. So the resume is to get you an interview. That's what the cover letter does as well. In the interview, you can shine as you. You're not a piece of paper. So keep that in mind that you're trying to get an interview. The second myth is that a resume is your total work history, and that is a difficult one because you can't put your whole work history on the document, and it's a lot of times your whole work history is not really relevant to the position you're trying to achieve. The truth is that a resume is a rhetorical document. It is a selling tool. It is a branding tool. And I often say in class that it's not the whole truth, but it is the truth and nothing but the truth. So when you go into court, you have to swear to tell the whole truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But we can't do the whole truth on a resume. So there are some things we leave out for the sake of making our case that, remember what we're trying to do, to get an interview. Because for any position, there are going to be lots and lots of people applying. You are not the only one trying to get that position. So you want to stand out. You want to get that interview. There might be 100 people who send in interviews, and they might only interview 5. It's usually a little bit worse than that, quite a bit worse. So the resume is tailored for that position specifically. Later on, you may have to fill out applications or other legal documents about your complete work history. That's a different matter. That you sign, that has to be truthful. But now this is not to say the resume has untruths in it. It just doesn't have every piece of information you could possibly give. So there's some editing involved, some cutting, some important cutting. The third myth has to do with length. One is that it should be several pages long, and the other extreme is that it should only be 1 page. For most of you, 1 page is going to be sufficient. You're young, you don't have an extensive work history. But for some of you, you do have an extensive work history. You've returned to school, you've already worked in your field, you have more than 1 degree, so 1 page might not be enough. So length, it just depends. It's no longer necessary to just have 1 page. That was a trend for several years. And before that was the trend of having a super long one. So while most of you probably don't need more than 1 page, even a seasoned professional doesn't need much more than 1 page, because the longer it gets, the more information is going to get lost. So again, we're back to what is most relevant for you to be interviewed for the position, to catch the reviewer's eye. So if you end up with your resume, the first draft, and you've got like 3 lines on the second page, no, you need to just edit that and get it down to one page. If you've got real information and you're not using excessive white page and it goes into half a page more, then that's probably all right. But still, a lot of times there's some editing that can be done, because the more you have, the more likely is the most important things will get lost. And I'm going to say this over and over again. The reviewers don't give a half an hour to each resume. They give typically 30 seconds or less, depending. So it's the structure, it's what you put first, and the key words that you use that matter. The fourth myth is that it should be attention-getting, and in truth, it should walk a line between attention-getting and professional and conventional. So you don't want to use fancy fonts or colors. One of the examples that I've posted in Georgia View, it says resume no, and the fellow uses some kind of cursive script in it. Not so much. Definitely don't want to put your face on it. Not sure why anybody would do that. There's definite problem there. You want to have a balance of white space on the sides and bottom. It's sort of like what we talked about with the letters. Applicants in the graphic arts, performing arts, and visual design operate under different standard here, and that would be different. They might use something a little more colorful and different kind of fonts, but a lot of times, depending on the technology that the company uses, the fonts and the visuals might not go through. So you need to be careful about that. Yes, again, people in performing arts, they do send pictures, of photographs. Those are important headshots. For most of us, that's not really relevant, and we know that there's a lot of discrimination based on people's names in hiring. So that would follow over into if someone's face is put on there. And I hate to be that way, but it just is. So you want to get the interview, and then they already have a good impression of you before you get to the interview. The fifth myth is that it should be in paragraphs. Actually, it should be bulleted. The only thing that might look like it's in a paragraph is going to be your summary of qualifications. And even that is not a paragraph in the sense of full sentences. The word I, this is very important, should not appear in your resume. The word I, the personal pronoun I, should not be on your resume at all. It can be in your cover letter, of course, but not your resume. So if I see that, that's the first thing I look for. And, no, not good. All your bullet points should emphasize actions rather than just roles or titles. So verbs versus nouns. And that's not to say you shouldn't put any titles down, but sometimes titles don't mean anything. They don't say what you did, what you accomplished. So emphasize accomplishments and value added. What did you bring to the organization or company? How did you make the company better, more efficient, more educated, make money, whatever? That's what's important. Myth number 6, that a resume is all you need. Oh, no, no, no. You should also have a LinkedIn account. If you don't have one, go ahead and get one. Definitely a clean social media presence. I think everybody knows that right now. But you need to go through your social media presence, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or some of these other things, and take some things down. I have a story about that, if you'll bear with me. I don't want to make this too long, but a couple of years ago, the business school brought in some folks in HR from some of the big companies around here, and they talked about this subject. And, I was all in favor of what they were saying, and I wanted our students to say it, but I kind of pushed back on them a little bit, and I said, well, how do you know that there's, that this account is connected to this particular person? And they wouldn't answer that question. And one of my students was there, and he said, yeah, they didn't want to answer that one. Of course, they have ways of finding out, getting in the back ends of these things and paying money to do it, to find your social media presence. And it may not be right, but it is. Another thing is that many employers will look at your credit rating. Oh, you say that's none of their business. Well, if you have a really bad credit rating, that probably shows something about your work ethic. Sorry, but um, and everybody's not going to have an 800, but if it's in the 300s, it's gonna not work for you. If you are in a creative field or a writer, you need an electronic portfolio. More about that later. I think in the class I'll probably bring it up. We are going to start requiring this of communication majors. You're going to need a different resume for each position, tweaked in some way or changed, and you need, of course, a superior cover letter. Myth number 7 is that you need an objective at the top of the resume. Well, maybe. The truth is that that's one variation. In some industries, objectives are going out of style. A better approach is to have a qualifications summary statement or branding statement or something similarly called right under your contact information. Neither one of these are good if they're not well written and appropriate. If you have an objective, make it about that particular position. So you're going to change it for every one that you do. So myth number 8, that the resume is all about you, and truthfully it's about what you can do for the company organization, and that's the biggest shift, along with that it's not everything you ever did that you have to make about this, that it's not about your life, it's not a biography, it is what you can do for the company, why they should hire you. So here's an example. I know I just said that objectives aren't always the best, but here's an example. To get a position as an entry-level accountant in a company with opportunities for advancement. Now I'm going to be really honest with you. Something like this appears on the midterm. Now I think you can look at that and say, well, that's all about the applicant. That has nothing to do with the company. It's better to use my organization and communication skills in management position to improve productivity. I probably need a couple of words more in there, but you get the point. So the emphasis on what you can accomplish. I have a link there that will give you some other samples of that. And here's another link that will help you with writing the resume section on the summary. And if you're going to do the branding statement, summary of qualifications, which I think you should try to do, you want it to be short with no wasted words, no full sentences, descriptive, geared to the position and organization, using keywords that are in the job description. And this is another very important thing about your resume. Your job description is the guide for writing the resume, what that asks for. So, and we'll talk about this later, if it says the very top qualification is must have certain educational degree or credential, then that's going to be very close to the top of your resume. Why would you stick it at the bottom when that's the thing they're looking for? Because I know this is going to sound funny, but a lot of people apply for jobs they're not qualified for. As someone who hires as a department chair and in for other positions, I know I get a lot of I've gotten a lot of resumes from people who weren't remotely qualified, and I don't know why they bothered, but they did it anyway. So they're going to look. I always look for the main qualifications that the job has to have. Usually, it's an academic one, and then I, discard those that don't have it. If the person doesn't have a degree in communication, I can't use them in my teaching communication courses here, but I get a lot of those. So the keywords, very important. The branding statement should also be behavioral. It should talk about what you can do, true and provable. There should be some backing to it. It should be original. It shouldn't sound like it's just a boilerplate or you borrowed it from somebody. It will be supported by the content of the resume, and it needs to use action verbs rather than just titles, as I already mentioned. So in this slide, I've given a sort of an example to get you started in thinking. I'm not sure there's such a thing as the perfect example, but this would be something along the line of a summary of qualifications or branding statement. You can also do them as bulleted lists, but don't put in anything that is just padding. They need to be concise and really just catchy keywords sell you up front. So we have here one for a licensed respiratory therapist. And I did that one because there are different people who take this class. Not everybody is a communication major. In fact, I'm finding that most of the people are not. Okay, myth number 9 is that there's one right way to do a resume, and in truth there are a couple of approaches. There's the chronological approach, which focuses on work history. There's the functional that focuses on skills, and then there's a combination version, which I kind of get you to do. The commonalities of both of these is that any work experience is listed backwards. So you start with the most recent one and go backwards. Again, only including what is relevant to the job in most cases. And that's going to depend on how much experience you have. If you have 20 years experience and you've had 5 different jobs, you don't need to list things older than 10 years. You don't need to list jobs you only had in the summer for, just to make some money, things like that. You put the relevant ones. Another commonality is that it focuses on what is relevant for the position. Myth number 9 continues that I suggest the following on your, and this is, you'll see this in the examples, especially the sample resume with call-outs that I have in Georgia View. You have 3 selling points: work experience, degree in education or training, and skills learned from your education or experience. Those are the 3 things that you have going for you. Now, probably one of those is stronger than the others, and one of those is the least strong. So you look at the job posting, what it's looking for, and then you look at your strongest points, and you decide to put the most important one at the top. So if it's demanding that you have certain skills in software, or that you have a certain 3 years experience in a particular job, or if it's demanding, it's requiring that you have a certification in something, then that's going to go as close to the top as possible. And as I said, there's a limited amount of time given to each resume, so put your best at the top. Myth number 10 is that lying is expected on a resume. Of course not, oh for goodness sakes. All right, now we're going to move into the actual writing of the resume. You have to start by knowing yourself. That's why I have you do the memo about the job analysis and organization. You have to know the organization. You have to know the position. What are they looking for? They posted it and it has information. Now, most of those tend to be ideal, so you're very rarely going to have everything that they want, but you can kind of go what's at the top and then what's preferred as it goes down the list. So you also need to know the environment for the job, because this is where knowing how much money you should make comes in. In other words, you got to do some research. And I do have a note up there about making sure you get your degree right. I correct this on everyone's resume. They don't know what degree they're getting. Okay, we don't have a BA in psychology, but I have students put that on their resumes. We don't do that here. They'll say, I'm getting a Bachelor of Psychology degree. No, you're getting a Bachelor of Science in Psychology or whatever. So please get that right. And then, as I mentioned, clean up your online presence and clean up your credit rating as much as possible. Okay, for general formatting, do not put in references or references available on the request. That'll show that you don't know what you're doing. You should have references available on a sheet of paper that you take to the interview, but don't put them on the resume, and don't put the line about references available in a request. If you do that, I'll know you didn't watch this, and you will fail the midterm because there are questions on there about that. Every reference should be specifically asked. You don't want your folks to be surprised, because they will say, I did not, they will not be pleased about that. Do not put family members. It should be someone who knows your work, especially in the field that you want to work in. Some other general formatting is to use space strategically. So there's a lot of stuff you don't need to put on there. First of all, do not put your high school on there or your GED. Okay? You're in college. You're working towards a college degree. You wouldn't have a college degree if you didn't have a high school degree. Okay? GED, not necessary because it's equal. That's what GED means, general equivalence. So it's the same, and you don't need to put high school anyway. And then some people, of course, are prejudiced against GEDs. I've worked in this field long enough to know that. And that's bad. I'm not saying it's right, but we are kind of working against the prejudices here. That's why you don't want to put your picture on there either. No hobbies unless it's directly related to position or leadership. And this gets into the what about church work? As a person who goes to church, faithfully, I would generally say that unless you had a high-level job there and something that was directly related to the position or leadership, for example, if you're trying to get an accounting job and you did the books for a church, or you're trying to get a job in working with children and you worked in the church's daycare or something like that, or with their children's ministry, then it would be relevant, but you don't want to just put church things on there as stuff I did, like volunteer information. Again, volunteer only if it's relevant and shows leadership. Okay, not that you just like to do something. Hobbies, etc., and volunteer information only under certain situations. No family information at all. Nothing unnecessary, and use phrases, not sentences. And again, do not use the word I. Okay, general formatting, as I said, put what is asked for on the job description first, because resumes are not studied, they're scanned, sometimes electronically for key information, and not everybody is qualified anyway. And so I've given some examples here of what I mean by that. If what the job posting says, you're going to make sure that that's very much at the top of the page. The very top of the page, of course, is going to have the contact information. Your name should be in caps, maybe slightly larger font, your phone, and your email. Your home address probably is not necessary, and so you can leave that off because you need all the space you can get. You need to have a Gmail address or something like that. Don't use your college one or one at a work place. That's definitely not good. And of course, it should be professional and generic, not sexy chick or Mr. Stud at yahoo.com. Okay. And it's also, you can post there under the email address if you have a LinkedIn page or a web page portfolio. That would be the only social media that you would include. As I mentioned, there are three main areas: skills, education, and work history. And there are a couple others I'll talk about. Excuse me. Remember, skills are something I can see you do. With education, do reverse chronological. This can be anything post high school. It would be an associate's degree, if you have an associate of applied science degree, of course. If you have any certifications that I know the Georgia Film Academy students will have a certification from them as well as their degree from Dalton State. And then your work history, and not necessarily in this order, okay? In the order that's going to make the best case for you. Some of you might have military service. That would be a fourth area you would, because a lot of employers like that. And then only volunteer experience if there's a reason for it, and not just to pad it. In terms of skills, these must be observable, objective skills that I can see you do. Friendly or people person is not a skill. Don't even put that on a resume. If you have led teams, that's different. If you have customer service experience, that's different. If you have problem solving experience, that's a skill. But friendly is not a skill. People person, oh my goodness, who's going to say they're not a people person? They're meaningless. Be honest about software skills. Its job description must be proficient in PowerPoint. Are you really proficient? Education. For this assignment, you can post-date if you like. That is, you can assume that you have completed your degree. Should you put your GPA? I don't think so. Unless it's a job where academics matter, it's much more important what you studied than that you got a 4.0 or 3.95. And you can list it for your major courses if that looks better, but generally it's probably not the best thing to do unless there's a reason for it. Now, graduate school is another issue. Do not list individual courses or skills related to those courses. Those are assumed if you finish the degree. In your cover letter, you can emphasize what you focused on and concentrations and things like that. Your work history, you full information, dates, address of company, title, duties, accomplishments. It's created web page for X unit. That's a verb. That's a do thing. Developed employee training that served 20 people. Initiating accounting procedures that saved $10,000. Okay, those are things that you accomplish. Very, very important under work history. Now, if you're in the military, if you have that, you can list your service dates, rank, and job duties. The military is wonderful about their acronyms, and my favorite is MOS, which means your job. But only people in the military know that. It's a different culture, and you have to translate it to civilian meanings. And a lot of people, when they get out of the military, go through some training in this. So be aware that civilians will not understand everything. You have to translate it. And then again, volunteer experience only if it is leadership, if it's valued by that organization. For example, if you're trying to work for a nonprofit, they would value community service, and if it's related to the job description. So I wanted to get this done, make this a shorter one. Resumes are fluid. They are works in progress. You have to adapt them as needed. So every resume you send to different jobs should be different. In Module 4 of Georgia View, there are lots and lots of additional helps. There are resources for resumes and some examples. If you use the template in Word, make sure that you do it right. Don't leave extraneous stuff or blanks of information or the little brackets or anything like that. Okay, the next PowerPoint is about cover letters and gets into specifics about that. Thank you for listening.